You can have a stable job and still feel one bad week away from panic, and that feeling isn't weakness, it's awareness. A stable job today means predictable hours and steady pay, usually just enough to survive next month. Real security is something else entirely, and the gap between them is where modern stress lives. This matters now because more people are working than ever, yet fewer people feel safe. Jobs are everywhere, unemployment looks fine, and anxiety keeps climbing anyway. That contradiction is the first signal that something deeper is broken. A job is a deal to trade time for money under specific rules. Security is what protects you when those rules suddenly change. For decades, those two ideas overlapped more than they do today. Jobs were built to last. Not from generosity, but because replacing workers was costly. Skills were scarce, loyalty mattered, and turnover created friction. That friction gave workers leverage, and leverage created breathing room. Losing a job was painful but rarely instantly devastating. Healthcare stayed put, pensions existed, and wages tracked living costs more closely. The system wasn't fair, but it absorbed shocks instead of passing them straight through. Over time, that shock absorption was stripped away. Technology made labor easier to replace, and globalization widened the labor pool. Costs stayed fixed while risk quietly moved downward. Jobs became stable on the surface, but fragile underneath. Today's stability often means dependable exposure to unavoidable bills. Rent shows up every month, no matter what your life looks like. Healthcare stays tied to employment, so losing income risks losing care, insurance, transportation, and debt never pause for bad timing. Your paycheck arrives on schedule, but it's always conditional. It depends on demand, performance, management, and market mood. Security would mean having options when that paycheck is disrupted. Most people don't have those options anymore. Not because they failed, but because margins vanished. Margins are the quiet difference between stability and security. A margin is time, cash, or flexibility that lets you wait. Here's the math most people never get shown. When expenses eat nearly all income, the job isn't supporting the worker. The worker is supporting a system that demands constant reliability. The system rewards patience and punishes urgency. That's not opinion, it's design. Capital moves slowly because it can afford patience. Labor moves fast because it has no choice. That difference decides who sets the rules. Stable job keeps you busy. Security gives you leverage. That's why two people earning similar incomes can live completely different lives. One has savings, lower fixed costs, and time to think. The other lives with decisions pressed tight against consequences. Urgency destroys negotiating power. It forces acceptance instead of choice. It's not from laziness or lack of ambition, but from speed. Public conversation rarely explains it this way. We talk about wages, promotions, and productivity. We celebrate job growth as if it guarantees safety. But job growth without margins just creates more pressure. That's why optimistic headlines feel disconnected from real life. People aren't confused. They're correctly sensing stress. Security used to be shared across systems that spread risk. Over time, responsibility shifted onto individuals. Savings replaced guarantees. Credit scores replaced trust. Resilience replaced protection. Failure became personal even when causes were structural. That shift quietly changes behavior. People stop pushing back. They stop planning far ahead. They choose predictability over possibility. A stable job rewards compliance. Security allows refusal. That difference shapes careers, families, and honesty at work. When losing a job means losing everything, silence becomes logical. This is why stability feels weaker than it used to. Jobs didn't decay by accident. They were redesigned to expose people to volatility. That exposure builds burnout, fear, and short-term thinking. A system like this can run for years, but it becomes fragile. Fragility doesn't arrive loudly. It shows up as exhaustion and quiet withdrawal. Growth continues until suddenly it doesn't. This isn't a warning about markets, it's a warning about people. An economy runs on trust, patience, and belief in the future. Those require room to breathe. That room is shrinking. So when we talk about stable jobs, we should ask harder questions. Stable for whom and under what conditions? Because stability without security is just managed vulnerability. The real question isn't whether jobs will exist. It's whether having one will ever feel like enough again. If you like the video, subscribe the channel, press the bell icon.